Kelly. How are you doing today? Thank you so much for joining us.
I'm doing great. Just busy and excited to be here, and just a lot going on.
Absolutely. So let me go ahead and do my top of the hour. Uh, Everyone, if you're joining us, I'm Marwan Cameron. This is the Conduit. Today is our Conduit Legislative Roundup. You have heard from La Resistencia and Maru Mora and what is happening right now in the Northwest Detention Center in Tacoma. You have all the ways to advocate and get involved there. And we had Annika Turner come on from Kayak. And now in the second hour, we're shifting to civil survival. And I have to make a correction because I was calling it prison reform, but it's actually justice reform is really the terminology. Is that correct, Kelly?
Yeah, I mean, prison reform is fine. We civil survival tends to focus a little bit more on reentry issues, and so there is a lot of different bills going on, and so our priority tends to be reentry. We do support a lot of the other prison reform bills going on, and we do have one going on, so it's either one works. It's fine.
So if you don't mind, will you just start off with telling us a little bit on, what is civil survival and what do you do?
Sure. So Civil Survival Project is a small organization, although we're getting bigger. I think we have 12 people working with us now, but the organization was found by our director, Tara Simmons, and another attorney named Amanda Dubois. And really is about facing and dealing with the barriers that those of us who have been incarcerated, like myself, face as we try to reenter society. So I think there's something like, somebody did a study, there's something like 40,000 collateral consequences of having a criminal record. And so our director, Tara, had gone to law school and then was not allowed to sit for the bar, and had to take it to the Supreme Court, and decided to start this organization to help work on getting rid of some of those collateral consequences. And the biggest way to do that is to change the laws that are actually holding us back. So we started off really initially focused on changing laws at the legislature, and that's still a huge focus of what we do. But we've also added a reentry legal aid project due to some of the bills that we passed that brings relief for people who have legal financial obligations that they owe. We've been able to pass some laws so that people can get relief from that. At this point, though, you really do need you can do it yourself, but it helps to have legal counsel. And so we have 5 attorneys now that are helping people get relief from their financial obligations. So we kind of have 2 arms. The one arm that's helping people directly get relief through the court systems, and then the policy side, which is where I am working to change the laws.
So that's a lot, right? And I have experience with civil survival because they were prominent at OC when I was teaching there, which I thought was fantastic because that is education is one of the best and fastest ways to change a person's outcome and their trajectory to take care of themselves and their family. So I just thought it was awesome that civil survival was there, and that's when I first met Tara and several other folks that were part of civil survival, and it's just gotten stronger from there because that was back in like 2013. So it's been around for a while and it's doing some great things. Why don't I transition here to some of the House bills that are important to civil survival, and let's get into that. I believe one is House Bill 1024 concerning labor and income of incarcerated persons. Can you go into that for me?
Yeah, so that's a bill that we're definitely excited about. We've been referring it to as the Real Labor, Real Wages Act, but it's really looking at essentially the forced labor, and the amount of money that people are being paid while they're currently incarcerated. And so, if you really take a look at it, I mean, prison labor really is an extension of the 13th Amendment, right? It's kind of a slavery loophole, or it's forcing people into forced labor. And so currently in our prisons, most people are making less than $1 an hour, and there's a cap of like $55 a month, which really just barely, people still are responsible for buying things for themselves inside prisons, on their commissary, writing home, having phone calls, all these types of things. And so the bill was a bold bill to begin with. One of the things that happens with the legislature is you don't often get everything that you ask for. And so a lot of times you'll want to start off asking for, the sun and the moon and everything that you want. And so the bill is a very aggressive and bold bill, asking to bring the wages up to minimum wage, from like 42 cents an hour up to minimum wage. The other thing it does is currently you can be infracted, which means that you can lose good time. There's all these different kinds of things that can happen to you if you refuse to work. So it gets rid of that. It's unlikely that we will get all the way up to minimum wage, but we are hoping to get at least a raise for people. We want to continue fighting until we do get up to minimum wage, but we're understanding that with everything going on in budget world and all of that kind of stuff, that we likely will not get exactly what we're asking for. But we do want to, one, bring attention to this issue of, the fact that we're forcing people to work 40 hours a week at 42 cents an hour, and bring in some relief for them. The other big part of it was having a savings account. So we looked at this as a reentry issue, having people be able to earn more money and build in a savings account so that when they are released, they have a foundation to start off with. Currently, you're given $40 at the gate, and that's it. And so we really would like to see people be able to build up a savings, have access to, it'll help them with access to housing, to transportation, to just kind of take some time and really have a successful reentry.
Kelly, let me ask you. I just want to paint this picture here. Tell me if I'm wrong here, right? So you're saying that typically a person who's incarcerated is making 42 cents an hour, whatever time they're locked up, right? Incarcerated. Let's call it 2 years, right? And during that 2 years, they're using that 42 cents to buy deodorant and food and toiletries and other things like that, which, if I'm not mistaken, still cost about the same amount as on the outside. Is that true?
Costs more.
Oh, it
They
costs more.
mark it up. I don't
Okay,
have the list in front of me, but yeah, it's a little bit of a racket, actually. There
so
is
let me keep painting the picture. So 42 cents an hour, right? So if you're working 40 hours, we're talking about what, 16 bucks a week, right? And it's a markup on these things. So deodorant is, 350 for the deodorant I use, so maybe it's $5, right? So over 2 years, I mean, you're doing a miracle if you were able to save $100. You get released, they give you $40, and they typically will put you on probation, if I'm not mistaken. So you go back to the place of the crime, the origin. Is that correct?
Yeah, well, it really depends. It gets a little bit confusing. Not everybody who gets released from prison is on. We refer to it as community custody,
Mm-hmm.
um, but not everybody has community custody. When I was released, I didn't have any
Okay.
requirements for community
So
custody.
on community custody or not, you got $40 in your pocket, and whatever meager savings you were able to save at 42 cents an hour, and it's like, okay, find housing, find food, find work, and who's going to give you a chance? You have no rental history, you're previously incarcerated, right? So what do we want these folks to do, and then not have a rate of recidivism at the same time? Like, what are the choices? If I don't have family, if I don't have friends, if I've been locked down for a long time, and they've moved on, or that was a very toxic environment and I can't go back to that, what am I supposed to do?
Exactly. Or even, just getting yourself a phone so you can get a job. Access to transportation, so again, so you can get employment and get access to housing. And the other thing, out of that 42 cents, you also are paying, they're taking money out of that for your legal financial obligations, for child support, all of that. So you're, even at the
They're
42
taking your
cents.
child support from 42 cents an hour? I'm
Yeah.
sorry, I laugh 'cause it's so ridiculous, and I
Hmm.
don't think people realize that, and they say, "Hey, pull yourself up from your bootstraps," or they say, "Well, if you can't do the time, don't do the crime," and that's not helpful, right? The situation is a situation, so what are we going to do to help folks integrate back into society, and I use that in quotes, uh, so that they can thrive, take care of themselves, take care of their families, and not be put in a position to where they feel like they don't have any options and this is what I have to do for survival.
Exactly. And I think that it also, it takes a toll on your mental health to come out and have to constantly essentially have your hand out asking for help every time you turn around. And so, the people inside want to work, they want to earn their own money, they want to pay for themselves. And it really, so it affects so many different areas of your life, not just the tangible things, but I think the intangible things about how you have hope and how you start to rebuild your self-esteem and start to rebuild your life.
I don't think that we do a good enough job kind of articulating that piece of it, right? And it has such a stigma associated with justice impacted people that on the other side, it's really hard. And as it is difficult for folks that are out here and the terminology that folks will say, well, I did everything right, I didn't make these bad choices or whatever, and so I'm struggling, so maybe I feel for this, population of people, but I'm trying to figure out how to survive. That can't be the answer, right? We literally are all in this together. And so I really would encourage folks to really investigate and dig deep on what that looks like. And so for all folks that are justice impacted, they're a son, a daughter, a father, a mother, and there has to be a way, a path of redemption to reintegrate and enter into society, if you will, in that way. What do you think? Am I saying something wrong? Do I need to work on my verbiage or
No, no, I think you're 100% right. And, so oftentimes, people who end up in prison, what, they really needed at some point was some healing. They're typically survivors of trauma. There's obviously the racism, the systemic racism that's rooted into our criminal legal system, that has affected generation after generation. It's often people who are already living in poverty, um, and so, there's just so much healing that needs to happen. And we're the only country that really locks up as many people as we do. Most other countries have moved to more restorative type justice, or just don't essentially lock people up for as much as the United States does. I think that I don't remember the exact statistic, but we make up like 5% of the total world's population, and we make up like 25% of people who are incarcerated.
and what's interesting is when we look around at other countries, we see that they don't incarcerate their people at near the levels, and they don't have the crime, to the levels that we do. But somehow it just seems like we have this American exceptionalism that won't allow us to look and say, okay, look, this country's doing this and this happens to work. So why don't we try that? That this is clearly working for them. Maybe we modify it for our situation, as unique as it may be, but we can do better.
Yeah, they have been looking a little bit, like Norway in particular, has some really great results. And I would say the biggest difference, if you look at their system, there's actually a documentary on Netflix called Breaking the Cycle that compares our two systems. And it's really about actually treating people like humans, which is, quite a concept. The US seems so focused on kind of like this punishment and punitive and um, method as far as, dealing with our criminal legal system versus getting to the root of the issues of how somebody, how somebody ended up in a position that they committed the crime in the first place.
Now, I missed a question in the chat a little bit ago, and it says, "And they get punished for not working." Is that right? So that may be in regards to while they're detained or once they're released.
Just while they're retained. So have the option, you're given a sentence, and usually you can get time off your sentence for good behavior, different types of things. And so you can lose that good time. I know our director has talked about, she was threatened with not being able to visit with her kids on the weekend if she didn't go to work. You can be put into the hole or solitary confinement for refusing to work. So it really is forced labor. Most people do, I think, want to work, but the idea of, um, being forced is really just an attachment to slavery.
Well, and how I understand it is, companies like Victoria's Secret and furniture companies were using prison labor. That sound right? I don't know if they're still doing that.
Yeah, well, the state has, it's called Correctional Industries, and they do furniture building, and it definitely is a complicated issue. They do supply a lot of the furniture to a lot of state agencies. It's open for bid, but the fact that Correctional Industries is able to use inmate labor, they come in at the cheapest of everybody. And so I know I know the mayor of Monroe signed in and testified in favor of this bill, and his city won't use them as long as they continue to pay, these substandard wages. And other state agencies are starting to take stands against this too, but we need everybody to come on board.
Well, and here's the deal, right? So now you've given, a person this knowledge, skills, and abilities in building furniture, but there's no job for them on when they get out, right? Because they're not going to pay. I was getting you for 24 cents an hour. I'm not paying you $18 an hour now. I'm just going to keep using the prison labor that I have. So that time is so wasted in not giving, folks a way to, hey, you know what, I'm going to get these knowledge, skills, and abilities. I'm not going to have to make these decisions once I'm out, and I'm going to be able to live and take care of myself and my family, as I said before. Let me go ahead and show this statement from Tara, where she was
I think it was when she
speaking.
read the bill, she did a really good job.
Yes, and just to show you, here is a comment form for House Bill 1024. Again, super easy to do it. Now, of course, I'm on my computer, so I have autofill, so this might seem like cheating, but you too can do it really easy, right? Just your address, your city, state, zip code, your name, confirm your email, your phone number, whether or not you support, oppose, or you're neutral. Of course, I support it. And then putting a note in there. And I think that note is really important. And then send. It is really that simple. So even if you don't have a note, again, that's another vote in support, right? That is that fast. It's that fast. So I really encourage people to do that. But let's go ahead and let me get this video ready for us here really quick. Just give me a second. And let me play that. I'm so thankful for you joining us today. Again, our guest is Kelly Olson from Civil Survival. You are joining us for our legislative roundup here on the Conduit. We're so thankful that you've joined us today. A lot of really important things are happening right now in Olympia, and your voice needs to be heard. But you need to know what's going on so that you can lend your voice. So let's go ahead and get into this here.
And reentry, it recognizes the vice chair.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. This bill is a step forward in trying to solve many problems at once. It is a work in progress. I know I'm going to continue to work with Department of Corrections and other colleagues in the Appropriations Committee to try and achieve the goals of the bill, which is to increase crime victim compensation and restitution to victims, also increase amounts going for child support, and also make sure that people have money in savings for when they reenter from incarceration. So, it's really tied to the forced prison labor and valuing human labor, all human labor, and wanting to make sure that people are paid fairly for the labor that they're doing inside prisons and meet our goals. So I respectfully ask everyone to vote yes.
Thank you. Any further comments? Sure. Public hearings on bills that have been referred to this committee today.
Thank you. I am Representative Tara Simmons from the 23rd Legislative District, which is Bremerton, Paulsbo, Bainbridge Island, and parts of unincorporated Kitsap County.
Thank you, and welcome our Vice Chair, the only formerly incarcerated member of the legislature. I'm not sure if there are any other formerly incarcerated members of legislatures around the country. Are you the only? There's one other.
Well, there's a couple more now since I got elected. We've been working to get other people in other states. So I think we have 3 now. So
well,
yeah.
Welcome, and let's hear more
Thank
about your bill.
you. This is really cool to be here in person finally. I remember coming down to the legislature and testifying before this committee so many years before I got elected. And this is my first time actually in person getting to testify before you. So thank you, Mr. Chair and Assistant Ranking Member Mossbrucker and all of my colleagues. It is a burden and a blessing both to be the first formerly incarcerated legislator in our nation. And this issue caused me a lot of trauma when I was incarcerated. And I think that's why I'm here, is to bring my lived experience into this magical space where we can actually implement change. Today, you'll hear about the 13th Amendment to our United States Constitution and how slavery was abolished except for punishment for a crime. And that's what's going on today in Washington State. People are still being punished with forced labor because they have committed some kind of offense. And those offenses are often rooted in mental health and substance use disorder. And this is the way our legislature has gone for many years, is to decide that people who have mental health issues and substance use disorder are criminals, and we're going to put them in prison instead of get them health care, and then we're going to force them into labor. Many people, in the legislature want to, or it's easier to think that people in prison are bad people. It doesn't take much thought or nuance in our thinking to think that way. And maybe they deserve this kind of punishment. But I'm here to tell you that 95% of the women that I was incarcerated with were victims of severe childhood abuse, sexual assault, and trafficking, and so many other things. And they don't deserve this type of punishment. There's also a lack of programming in prison. We don't have a lot of no access to mental health care, really. And so when I was in prison, I spent my time self-organizing with other women to do things like celebrate recovery, Bible studies, crocheting circles, and things like that. And that's really what helped me heal. But the DOC will have you work with threats if you do not work for 42 cents an hour in the kitchen or in the custodial unit or in the laundry room, and you will get a major infraction. And that means you can go to solitary confinement. But for me, what that meant is that I couldn't see my kids. My kids came to visit every weekend. And if I did not do what they said and work for 42 cents an hour, then I could not see my children. And so I think, that coercion is really tied to the 13th Amendment and the abolishment of slavery, and how we have said we're not going to have people be slaves unless we're going to force you because you've committed an offense. This bill, and I also want to give another example of what $55 a month will get you in prison. First of all, the maximum you can get for class 3 jobs is $55 a month, but then that's deducted by LFOs, child support, cost of incarceration, all this other things. So you might come out with like $25 a month. And for a menstruating woman who needs to buy tampons on the commissary, because when I was there, feminine hygiene products were very subpar if you got them. And if you had a heavy flow, you had to go to the doctor and pay a medical copay to go to the doctor, and then hope that the doctor would believe you that you needed more. So many of us had to buy tampons on the commissary, which is $6 a box. Then we have to buy our own deodorant, Q-tips, shampoo, conditioner, soap. And to do that on $25 a month when you're working, 40 hours a week at 42 cents an hour, I think is just inhumane. So this bill actually, I'm trying to actually make everybody whole. So it's about supporting victims too, because I was a victim long before I was ever a prisoner. And I want people to be able to earn their money so they can pay their restitution, so they can also send money back home to support their children, but then also have savings. So when they come out of prison, they're not released with $40 and a bus ticket. They can pay for housing and transportation and actually have a fighting chance of not coming back. That is community safety. That is making sure people don't go back to working in the underground economy and have a fighting chance. And so I'm trying to do this because what I've heard in the last couple of years from some of my colleagues is they don't want to give people housing vouchers. They don't want to give people food stamps. They don't want to give people things. Well, let's let them earn something so when they come home, they have those things. So I am really just asking my colleagues here to work with me. I know that this bill is not perfect. I have talked with the Department of Corrections. I'm willing to modify and actually increase the amount that we give to restitution to victims and to child support, maybe play with those numbers a little bit. But I would really hope that some of my colleagues across the aisle would open your heart and understand that people in prison, we're all victims first, and that this policy is egregious and that we can work together to change it. So thank you.
Thank you very much. Well stated.
All right. I think that's a powerful testimony there by our own Tara Simmons, which is fantastic. And that really does speak to the point, right? I think this is really important. Do you have an idea on whether or not Congress is leaning toward adopting this House bill? Is there political will for this? Is there, where's the wind blowing?
Well, it always comes down to how are we going to pay for this? And it is the state legislature
State legislature, yes.
that will be deciding this. So, ironically, there were definitely members, especially last year, that talked about actually raising the wages. But at this point, it's passed out of the policy committee, and it's just had a hearing on Monday in the appropriations committee. And as Representative Simmons was talking about in her intro of the bill, that she's working with Department of Corrections. I think that there is will to get something passed. It will probably be just a raise of maybe $1 to $2. So not a giant, not what we were looking for or what we are hoping for. A lot of times what we have found in the legislature is that it's slow to move. So, important part of it was starting this conversation and then chipping away at things and coming back and getting more and getting people to understand. I mean, the people who make these laws are the people in the legislature. Not all of them understand fully kind of the depths or the breadth of the collateral consequences that we go through. And it takes us sharing our stories. I, for one, it took me like 10 years after prison before I actually got involved in advocacy. I really just wanted to kind of put my head down and like stay on a straight and narrow path and not get in trouble. And, I didn't matter. I came out and got 2 degrees. It didn't matter. I couldn't get jobs or housing. And, I watched Tara's story and really learned the importance of those of us who are out here, who can, to share our stories, to get involved, to use our voices, to actually enact change. And it's hard. There's a lot of trauma that we've experienced, and coming out and sharing our stories of having been to prison is, not something you necessarily feel like talking about every day. But once I started to realize how important it was, I realized that it really is necessary if we're going to enact any type of change.
So Would you mind, Kelly, just speaking from your own experience? What was it that got you over the hump? Right, it was so difficult. Like you said, folks won't hire you. You're seeking education. What was it? Um, that can be inspiration and encouragement to others that are going through this or going to be going through this soon.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of it, I think, came down to one, being able to deal with my mental health and start to heal from some of the traumas of my own past. I was fortunate that I had family I could live with when I immediately came out. I also relied on education. I came out and got a bachelor's degree and a master's degree. However, I will also say that even with those degrees, I still faced a tremendous amount of discrimination. Even getting a job at the state, I was forced through a lot of trauma investigation, all this type of stuff, just to have a job that I had there. So probably the biggest thing was really building a foundation of my own mental health and my own support to be able to kind of withstand that. Um, and then the next biggest thing was really getting involved with other community members who are having the same fight and who are going through the same issues and can understand the struggle that you're going through. Because as much sympathy as my family had for me, having not gone through the amount of discrimination, it was difficult for them to understand why I still struggled to get gainful employment, even with a master's degree. And you shouldn't have to do that. Education is not necessarily the path for everybody. I think everybody should be able to get a living wage job. It was just a place where that helped me find my voice, um, and continuing to, be persistent, build those relationships in the community. I did a lot of volunteering, which is not easy to do either. That's a lot of time to put
Hmm.
in to basically work for free to get experience. So, my goal is to hopefully build better opportunities for people than necessarily the path that I went down.
Well, I appreciate you sharing that. I know that can be tremendously difficult. Now, I know that this is not the only House bill that you're advocating for during this legislative session. So, are there some other ones that you'd like to talk about?
Yeah, there's several, um, and most of the ones on our priority list did start out at House bills, but we do support Senate bills too. But so we have House Bill 1169, which is around legal financial obligations. This is an area where we've done a lot of work on. Civil Survival has, um, to get rid of some of the fees and fines and just the debts that people incur as being part of the criminal legal system. And so we were able to get rid of most of the mandatory fees and fines. The only ones that were left is there's a victim penalty assessment, which is $500, and a DNA fee that is $100. And the victim penalty assessment actually goes to the crime victim advocates and the prosecutor's office that support crime victims for who are going who've been had a crime perpetrated against them, and so it supports them through the process, through the court system, and all of that kind of important part of things. And so one of the things with the LFOs is that most people can't pay them, so they go uncollected. There's probably only about like 20 or 30% is actually collected. So most of this debt is not collected. And what we really want to do is just eliminate them and fund those services from the state so that we don't get rid of the services, but we just backfill them. Because what we find is that there's a term or phrase that's often used, which is we're spending dollars to collect dimes. Um,
Mm,
and so, we shouldn't be funding our court systems on the backs of poor people And it also really, disproportionately affects people of color. There's a lot of things that the LFOs get in the way of. So like you can't vacate your record or anything like that until you've paid off all of your LFOs. So this bill would get rid of the last 2 mandatory fees, and it would also give a guarantee funding to the counties to still provide those services. So that's an important bill.
That's
Um,
huge. So let me jump in, and we have a little bit of testimony from Tara on that. Are you okay on time?
yeah,
Okay, good. So again, everyone, thank you for joining us today. This is the Conduit Legislative Roundup. We're talking about House bills and Senate bills right now. My guest is the great Kelly Olson from Civil Survival, and we're talking about House Bill 1169 right now. So let's go ahead and check in with Tara again on this. Again, there's so many ways to get involved, and I encourage you to, well, we're trying to bring this stuff to you because it may be difficult. Like, where do I start? Where do I go? So we can bring this information to you. We can bring the subject matter experts to you so that you can get informed, get educated, and hopefully it may stir you to action. And there's so many different things to get activated about. So if this particular issue doesn't float your boat, there's going to be another one that does. Again, I want to bring attention to what's happening in the Northwest Detention Center in Tacoma, live. So please check that out. But let's go ahead and listen to Tara again here.
Serving on this committee. Sorry, I have a little cold today. I'm losing my voice, but I'm COVID free, just so you know. For the record, I'm Tara Simmons from the Best District, the 23rd, same as the chair. Back again for another attempt at eliminating the scheme of monetary sanctions to fund our court system. I want to mention that the Chief Justice Gonzalez spoke about this in the State of the Judiciary this year. Last year, we made a lot of progress with House Bill 1412, but this very important policy was stripped out of that bill in the other chamber. I also want to flag that although it came out of this committee on party lines, I want to thank the good member from the 16th who voted for it in appropriations and on the House floor last year. Also want to say I'm really glad that we have a public defender here on this committee with the new member from the 18th. So I hope that you can share with the rest of the legislature the impact that these LFOs have on individuals long after they've paid their sentence and serve their time, and how they can't vacate their criminal record until they pay them off. And some people are on Social Security disability and can never pay it off, and so they lack access to housing and employment and all these other things. I want to also note for the record that there's no opposition to this bill because I've worked closely with victims, prosecutors, law enforcement, AOC, and so many stakeholders. And so this is really about freeing up county clerks from having to enforce these debts that they cannot collect on, and instead providing a sustainable source for victim services and the DNA collection. This will free up county clerks to actually enforce restitution against an individual and help victims more, and not have to spend so much time trying to enforce on poor people who can't pay. And with that, I just ask for your support again this year.
Thank you. A question to the Prime Sponsor? Are you nodding in my direction? Okay, Representative Cheney.
Thank you. I guess my question is this would this bill change it to be waivable fees under a Blazina analysis, or would this completely delete those fees? And the reason I ask this, it seems like there might be a dichotomy between Blazina and its progeny and those who can financially be able to do this, perhaps private retained clients and things like that. Thank you.
Yeah, I think
This is just getting rid of it for ease and efficiency. As you probably know, under Blazina, you can never waive these two. So even people on Social Security disability that you can't collect on, they still sit there dead forever, and the county clerks continue to send out monthly notices and waste time and money and postage. And so this was actually a deal with clerks and prosecutors, and like, let's just get rid of this scheme on these two mandatories because these funds are really important. It's important to have victim services, and let's just fund that, because to try and do the math, I mean, I think it's a small amount of people that actually retain counsel and have money. Most of the people going through the system rely on public defense. So it was just too difficult to do the math and figure that out.
Okay, thank you. Let's hear.
All right, so I'm gonna stop it there. I wanted to get in one question just to kind of see where their mindset was, and then the information that she's given on the other side. So often people don't really think of the ramifications. They're so enamored with people must pay, right? They have to pay their debt to society, that they're not looking at the impact and that it's doing just so much of a negative. Also, I want to mention all of these videos are on the Conduit also. So if you want to catch up that way where you don't have to sift through and try to figure it out, shout out to Jeff. He's taken painstaking time to take snippets out so you can go directly to the information and catch yourself up. Do you want to just speak to this bill 1169? Any other things that you wanted to add there? Oop, you're muted.
Yeah, sorry about that. Yeah, actually, this was a quote from a hearing yesterday that was actually there's another bill regarding youth fees and fines and getting rid of them for youth. But one of the youth that testified just really talked about the fact, because one of the things that the members who are against this type of relief is that that the only way people can really show remorse for their actions or any kind of accountability is through this financial, through some sort of financial contribution. And, the youth really shared that, being able to write a check does not show remorse or, bring any kind of accountability. So I think that that's really important, that we don't just tie, people who come from privilege and have the money to just pay it off right away. It doesn't mean that they learned anything either from what they did, or that they have any more remorse than somebody who doesn't have the money to pay. And so I think that's just an important thing to think about as we try to, essentially add all these monetary sanctions onto people through the criminal legal system.
Yeah, that is very informative. So we've got House Bill 1024, we've got House Bill 1169. What's some other bills that you're advocating for this season?
Another one that is a little bit different for us is the solitary confinement bill, which is 1087. And what this one does is it limits the amount of time that somebody can be in solitary confinement. Essentially the United Nations has said that any more than 10 days in solitary confinement is torture. And we still are placing people for, a crazy amount of time in solitary confinement. And so we're advocating that no more than 15 consecutive days and no more than 45 days in a calendar year be spent in solitary confinement. It really is, essentially it's taking away all your senses. You don't have any interactions with any people. You're just in a cell. And what that does, what it's been shown to do to people and their mental health, it creates an extreme amount of trauma for people. It really changes their whole being, that some people are not really able to even come back after having spent so much time. And we have people that have literally spent decades in solitary confinement. And it's torture, and we need to stop doing it.
If you don't mind, Kelly, I'm going to share my testimony on this. and folks that have been subscribers to the Conduit for a while know some of this story. But my brother, Thomas Cameron, has spent a lot of time in prison, both federal and state prisons. And in that, um, I don't know if it was in order to keep himself safe, but sometimes he would do things to get put into solitary confinement, and so that he wouldn't be raped, or beat on or outnumbered. And this was my brother was a jack dude, right? He could fight, he could defend himself. And in that, there were instances which was shared with us, of him spreading his own feces on the window and the door of the cell, um, and not wanting the correctional officers to come in. And the only reason why I know that story is my brother was arrested on 9/11 in 2019, and within an hour of him being in the Kent holding cell, he was found hung dead in that cell. And while there are cameras in that cell, um, let's just say it was quite suspicious on how this all took place. My brother had a lot going for him. Things were doing well. He was well to do. He wasn't in distress. There was no signs or notes that he wanted to take his own life. And so, regardless of what we believe on if he actually did take his life or there was something nefarious that took place, the thing is if you say that he took his life, then what he's looking at is, I can't do any more time in that system, and I'm gonna take myself out, and I'm gonna go out on my own choices. And to make that decision on such a split, right, less than an hour in a holding cell, right? We have all the records. I did a Freedom of Information Act. It's all here on the Conduit for you to see. But what you're talking about is that torture is what my brother went through for years in solitary confinement. And as a loved one on the outside and being helpless on, well, what can we do? How do we support? He was shipped to prisons all over this country. And so he had no contact with family members and things like that. It's cost prohibitive for us to fly out and visit him. And that's my testimony on that. And so one of the justifications that the Kent police made of why they did what they did, in regards to how long it took for them to get help to him, was they said, well, when he wasn't responsive, what they did was they said they had to go and get the riot gear and get dressed up to go in because he had spread feces in prison. Well, how do you know that when this man has only been in a holding cell for an hour? How do you have that detail? Like, that's very interesting. And that he's dangerous and he was going to attack the police. And so this was all used in their justification on why it took so long to get into the cell. And then they said, oh, yeah, we tried to render, medical aid, and we know how those things go. So that is this bill definitely to me is very important, and I will be definitely speaking up on this one in regards to making my voice heard.
Yeah, thank you for sharing. I'm sorry about the loss of your brother.
Yeah, that's tough. Well, we're coming to the top of our hour, and I so appreciate you coming on and sharing with us. Are there a few more bills that you wanted to talk
Yeah,
about?
I'll go over them just really quickly, and I think you guys can put links on your um, website. But there's 1174, which is improving access to for voting for people who are in jail. So most people, we passed the bill so that everybody outside prison walls are able to vote. And we want to make sure that people who are sitting in jail who have not been convicted of a crime are receiving their ballots and are able to exercise their right to vote. Um,
Now, is
and
that one not on the books yet? Because I thought I
it's,
read something where they could.
yeah, so we changed the law. It went into effect in 2023. It used to be that you had to be outside of prison and off of community custody before
Hmm.
you could have your right to vote. And we changed it so that as soon as you're released from prison, you have your right to vote back. There's no strings tied to it whatsoever. However, part of doing that also, we want to make sure that people in jail have access to their ballots. And it's not necessarily been a priority of the jails to make sure that people are getting their ballots and are being able to exercise their right to vote. And so we want to make sure that people do have that right, and that the jails are equipped to get them their ballots and allow them to vote. So essentially, it's just kind of creating a requirement for the jails to make it possible, make it happen. We did some outreach this last voting cycle, and we're able to go in. We went into the Kitsap County Jail and helped people register to vote. And it was great to be in there. And so it hasn't always been a priority for the jails, and it's something that we want them to, for it to be in statute so that they're required to do it. And then the other bill I can go over really quick too is 1492. This is the providing relief for people who had a Blake. I don't know if you guys have done anything on that, but there was the Supreme Court decision that ruled that the drug possession law was unconstitutional.
Please go into that one. Let's take a little time there to unpack that, because this is really impacting our unhoused population, especially here in Bremerton. So yes, please take some time on that one.
Okay. So there's a couple of different ones around Blake. So first of all, for those who are watching and don't know, the Blake decision essentially made possession of a controlled substance unconstitutional. And so what that meant was, one, it changed the law so you cannot be charged for possession of a drug. And then it also meant that anybody who had been charged for a possession charge needs to have their charge vacated, and they need to have any fees or fines refunded to them that they paid. And this goes all the way back to like 1971 or something like that, when that law was put on the books. So yeah, there's kind of two components to that. So there are some bills around. So what happened when the Supreme Court decision passed was, and this was 2 years ago, the legislature made a new law that essentially made it so that if you were caught with possession of a drug, that you needed to be referred to treatment at least 2 times, and then after that you could be charged with a misdemeanor. And that law sunsets this year. And so a big battle that will be going on, that we're not necessarily in the middle of, is whether or not they're going to recriminalize drug possession or not. So there are legislators that are working on that. We'll probably weigh in on it a little bit. But the bill that we're specifically talking about is what happens to everybody who had these charges and is owed this money back. Because what's happening is, throughout our state, people are looking to get their refunds, getting their records vacated, and it's not being handled in a uniform manner across our state. And so some counties are handling it different than others. And so the bill that we're working on is the cleanup of this decision and making sure that people are getting what's owed to them. And then, like I said, there will be another bill that'll be focusing on whether or not they choose to recriminalize, which there does look like there's a push to do that. We'll probably be pushing against that. But
so let me ask you, Kelly, when you're talking about recriminalizing drug possession, is this for marijuana also?
I would need to look at it. That, like I said, I've been focused on the one going backwards, so I haven't been very focused on the recriminalization of it, because that's not an area that we're super focused on or have the capacity. And the bills that we are working on, we get into the weeds of, and so it takes a lot to. So I would not want to answer that one without being fully.
And I asked that question just because this seems really dangerous for people in regards to, okay, it was decriminalized for a time, which, kind of removes the stigma. And so, folks are using drugs or possessing drugs, and then you recriminalize it. It's almost like a trap. You know what I mean? So this seems really dangerous. And I'm in the chat. It says Bremerton is recasting it as public use. So so what it's not that it's illegal to have the drug possession, but the use in public is a criminal offense. So that's kind of the workaround with the
Mhm.
law. So can you speak to that on how it's like folks may have the misnomer of, well, no, it's decriminalized, but then the government kind of circumvents the law and still finds a way to criminalize people.
Yeah, well, I think that that's part of the reason why the legislature needs to find a fix that's statewide, because then we start to get into a pretty dangerous territory of essentially like justice by geography. If we have Bremerton that's doing this, Tacoma that's doing this, Yakima that's doing this, then you start running into these areas where it could be different wherever. So
All right. Well, I appreciate that. I wanted to welcome on Paulo Nunez. And Paulo, say your last name for me. I'd never known how to pronounce it.
Yeah, it's Nunes Bueno.
Bueno.
Yeah,
Bueno.
yeah, it's simpler than you'd think when you're looking at it. It's just Bueno.
So Paulo is from Front and Center. Kelly is with us from Civil Survival. I wanted to introduce the two of you. And Paulo, we're still finishing up on this, but if you have something to add in here, please feel free to do so. As we are at the top of the hour at 3 p.m., we just want to welcome everyone that has been watching us for the last 2 hours here. And all of you that are just joining us now. Paulo, go ahead and refresh your screen because you have only one bar, so your internet signal isn't great. You are watching The Conduit. This is our legislative roundup. And at 1 o'clock, we were talking about what's going on in Tacoma right now, in the Northwest Detention Center, with the detainees, those that are being detained, being tear gassed, the marches that are taking place today, tomorrow, and Sunday, and how you can get involved with that, and the House bills and Senate bills that are associated with that. Now we're talking about prison reform with Kelly, and we're going to get into transportation equity with Paulo. So we got a full slate today. We're going to finish up our conversation on prison reform. I wanted to go ahead and play this video. Paulo, are you in a hurry? Because what I can do, if you are short on time, I can come to transportation and come back. You're good?
I'm good.
All right. I appreciate you. Let me give you the horn. Paulo got the email just a few hours ago, and I told him I was going to send it yesterday. So your flexibility is awesome. I appreciate you. So let me go ahead and play this video here so we can get some context, and then we'll come back after the video.
Marwan, I'm not sure if other folks have the same thing, but I can't hear the video.
Okay, hold on. Let me fix that then. That happens from time to time. Everything is great, and then it's not. All right, let me start that over just a little bit there. Is that better?
Civil Survival Project, representing indigent clients in obtaining Blake relief and providing self-help for people who want to try to obtain relief on their own. I've worked on Blake cases in dozens of counties and municipalities throughout the state. Every single one of them has its own process and wildly different understandings of which LFOs are affected. For example, in a recent case, a prosecutor prepared an order vacating my client's conviction for simple possession, but did not address LFOs, even though the prosecutor agreed the LFOs should be refunded. The prosecutor insisted the clerk would automatically know to refund those, but after the order was entered, the clerk told me she's unable to refund any LFO on the basis of that order. The end result is more litigation, which consumes the time of all parties involved. More importantly, it delays the justice to which my clients are entitled under Nelson v. Colorado and the refunds they desperately need. In the current landscape, obtaining relief is difficult and cumbersome for me, and I've been practicing law for 13 years. It's near impossible for non-lawyers to navigate when they try to obtain this constitutionally mandated relief on their own. House Bill 1492 addresses those problems, and I urge you to pass it.
Thank you. Can we hear from Camarina Zorozua, please?
Good morning. Camarina Zorozua, co-founder and legal director at The Way to Justice. We're a nonprofit civil legal aid organization based in Spokane. We serve justice-impacted individuals in Eastern Washington and across the state. Our mission is to empower communities through advocacy and access. We offer post-conviction relief through an equity lens to remove barriers to our clients so that we can address the collateral consequences of convictions. This helps our clients access services, housing, employment, and education opportunities without being seen as second-class citizens due to an old charge or conviction that is actually eligible for relief under statute, or in this case, under Blake. We do this by reducing legal fines that they owe, restoring their rights, and vacating convictions. We've vacated state v. Blake convictions in dozens of counties all across the state of Washington and have experienced the inconsistencies. Our work is focused on a holistic model. We center the individual needs of our clients. We have screened every individual who walks through our doors for Blake relief. Many of the people we come in contact with do not know that they have a qualifying case under Blake or that relief is available at all. Through this work, we've seen the harm caused by actually 50 years of the war on drugs, the impact on our clients, their families, their loved ones, and our communities. These harms have been disproportionately felt by people of color, those who have substance use disorders, mental health needs, and those living in poverty or homelessness. Due to the war on drugs, discrimination through policing, the targeting and criminalization of people of color throughout our justice system, bias and discretion given to prosecutors in their powerful positions that result in harsher sentencing, lack of sentencing
I'm
alternatives.
sorry, you're out of time, so you're pro on the bill, right?
For the most part, except for Section 3, we would like to express our concerns regarding ex parte entry of orders that would deprive defendants of notice and the impact that that may have on immigration proceedings in federal courts.
Thank you very much. That will conclude the public testimony and conclude the public hearing.
All right. So, just a few things that I wanted to note there is you really do need to practice your 3 minutes or your 1 minute or however much time that you have. It goes so quick and so fast. And sometimes you have 100, 200 people testifying, and it's got to be a challenge to sit and listen to all those. But you're also trying to convince through those stories. So it is really important to prepare for that. Kelly, have you done that before?
Yeah, I've testified several times. So
is it scary?
It's not too bad. They're usually pretty good, but it is important to practice your time so you don't get over and that you're concise.
Are there any opportunities to testify coming up?
I would need to look up the schedule. Trying to see where we are. We're in a weird place where we've moved out of the policy committees for most of these. There is a pardons bill on Monday. And I think actually the recriminalization of the Blake bill is also on Monday. If people want, and you can sign up to testify both remote or in person.
Okay, and I will put that in the chat here shortly. And so if folks want to get involved, is there another bill that you wanted to talk about? I just wanted to make sure I got them all.
No, that's good.
If folks wanted to get involved how do they get involved with civil survival? If they don't necessarily want to get involved with civil survival, but they do want to provide testimony, can they come to civil survival and you'll walk them through it or refer them to where they need to go? What's the process for that?
You can share my email if folks want to reach out. I'm happy to help.
Okay. What I'll do is I'll have you type that. You're so fast. You already got it in the chat for me. You're cool. All right. So I'm going to go ahead and share Kelly's email in the chat. So that is one way that you can get in touch. I'm also going to put Civil Survival's website here on the screen for everyone. They have been doing so much good work here in Kitsap County. There's videos here, legislation and advocacy. You see Tara Simmons there with what's that? Looks like Jay Inslee. How to get involved. There's so many things to advocate for, and either you or loved ones are justice impacted. And what that means, trying to just live, pay your rent, go to work, eat, be healthy, provide for your family if you have one. It's so important. So I just encourage folks to get involved there. Go ahead, Kelly.
I did just put in the chat. We are having a lobby day on February 20th. So we will be down in Olympia. I put a link to it in the chat. You can register there, and if you're available, we'll have a program in the morning where we'll kind of teach people about the bill process, how to testify, and then in the afternoon, we'll have appointments with your legislators. That is a really good opportunity to get involved.
Well, I'll give you a little secret, Kelly. G2 will be providing transportation to the youth for that event on that day. So I will see you there.
Okay, good. Look forward to
We're also going to document it. So we look
Awesome.
forward to seeing you in person. Well, I want to thank you for coming on and sharing all this information with us. It's so very important. Very illuminating. Again, I was telling Maru how much I've learned. Actually, I was telling Anika that, in an hour's time, I've learned more than I've learned the entire year. And now I'm 2 hours in, and my mind is blown by just the need and the advocacy for so many different groups. And there's something here for you to jump in and advocate for folks. And there's so many different things that you can do, writing letters, right, through PayPal, donating your time, doing a selfie, right? I showed how easy it was to just sign up and make your comment. I mean, it's like literally seconds to do. And again, subscribe to the Conduit. We're putting this information on so you don't have to try to dig around and find it, because I know it can be a lot. So we're trying to create a central location for this information. But again, we just thank you for your time and you coming on. The big one also is don't forget Bremerton Port Orchard votes.org. Show up this week, bills that need your support. I'm going to go ahead and put that up there too. And that is also on the Conduit. Kelly, any last words before you go?
Nope. Thanks for having us.
All right. I appreciate you so much. Thank you. Please enjoy your weekend, and I can't wait to see you in person.
Okay. Thank you. Bye.
All right. All right.